Hey, what's up guys? So for the project this week, the first thing that we need to do is to pick up our materials. For me, up here in Washington, that means taking a short trip down to Portland, Oregon to go to Crosscut Hardwoods and Gobi Walnut. So let's go check it out. When you're picking lumber, a couple things you want to keep in mind: how straight the grain is on it, how many knots are in that wood. For the project that we're doing this week, we chose walnut and hard maple. I chose some S3S lumber. What that means is we have one edge of our lumber here that is rough that we're gonna have to rip down on our table saw. The other edge here on the material has already been jointed and is at a 90-degree angle to one of these faces. When we are breaking down our material to our desired lengths, we want to avoid things like knots and try and cut those out. What we're doing right now is we're cutting just the rough edge of the board. We're going to rip down our walnut pieces, which will serve as our brick portion of our cutting board. The length that we want the brick to be 3 inches long on the finished product. We want to wear a mask. We want to double check our measurement from the distance from our fence to the tooth on our blade. We want to have some sort of push stick ready to guide the piece through, pushing forward even steady pressure, but also towards the fence at the same time so that we get a nice clean cut. Alright, so now that we've done all our cuts of ripping on our table saw, we've gotten the desired thicknesses that we want for the strips to make whatever design that you're into. So that might mean making a brick style pattern like this, or just a random kind of whatever pattern. Okay, so a couple things that you might want to have for your glue up. Cauls. So cauls are just two chunkier pieces of wood, typically a hardwood you're going to want to use, longer than your glue up panel, covered in packing tape. You're going to need some clamps to clamp the cauls, nice beefy parallel clamps. After you get your cutting boards out of your clamps, you're gonna have a little bit of glue cleanup if you didn't scrape all of it away. You're gonna grab some sort of either card scraper or carbon scraper, and you're just gonna gently kind of clean up all that glue squeeze out. Just wanna clean it up so there's no huge bumps of glue when we run a light pass through the planer. So at this point you have a cutting board. That's awesome, that's great. You could totally stop here. What we're gonna do is we're gonna make an end grain cutting board. So we're gonna chop each little section of this cutting board, take that piece and flip it up over on its end so that you'll see that all across the top just repeated over and over. Okay, so now essentially what we've done is we've taken our entire glue up and we've cut it into individual strips. And now what we're gonna do is take those strips and just turn them on their end. Take our strips that we've cut from the maple after that glue up, and we're just gonna sandwich those in between each piece. Then what we want to do is essentially start to create a pattern. The little center bit of our maple piece lines up with the center of our walnut piece. We're gonna chop off just a little bit here on the end of both pieces until we get our center marks to line up exactly where we want when we flip the two pieces. Alright, so we now have officially created our pieces that are shorter, and we have one end that's short and one end that's long on that little brick section. So essentially all we have to do is take one short end, and then the next piece has to be a long end. Do that just by flipping the piece over. So we have short, long, short, long, short, long, and then that right there is how we get our brick pattern. You're gonna wanna use a ton of clamps, maybe not as many as I used in this case, but nevertheless, you wanna make sure you get good even pressure on all parts of your board. Then you'll want to sand your board up to 120 grit, filling any voids with either sawdust and glue, or in my case, a CA glue. You could also use an epoxy. I like to add handles to all the undersides of my boards. To do this, I like to use a shop-made template and a router bit made for template routing. Now is a good time to clean up and find that tool that you've been searching everywhere for. Then spray some water on your boards to pop the grain and finish by sanding with 220 grit.